Hey everyone, welcome to the investor.bet AFL Round 5 betting review. In this video I'm going to go through all 9 games from Round 5, go through who won and how they won. So we're going to look at these games from beyond just what the score was, but how that result came about. I'm going to read through my notes for every side and their performance, which goes into my database. So when I go back through and look at teams' form and look at how these teams played last time they met and that kind of thing, have a record of what actually happened in that game beyond just what the final score was. We're also going to look at the betting data from these games. If the market was right or wrong, did the money go the right way? And this weekend, it was definitely the wrong way more often than not. The market only moves the right way in 6 of 17 instances when you look at sides and totals. I'm going to break down which one of those were right, which ones were wrong as we go through each game. Overall, on the round, it was super high scoring. This was gather round, so all games were played in South Australia. Majority at Adelaide Oval, but you also had a couple of games at Barossa Park and also at the Norwood Oval as well. But 6 of the 9 games went over the total points line. Pretty much every side had no issue scoring, other than the teams who struggle to score as it is. Your West Coast, Melbourne and Richmond all scored 57 or less. Pretty much every other side, other than the Swans, they were kind of mid-range 78. Every other team scored close enough to 90 or above. Favourites won and covered 6 of the 9 games. The 3 underdogs who won and covered were Geelong beating the Crows, coming from behind to win on Thursday. Essendon beating Melbourne, and then also Port Adelaide beating Hawthorn in the final game of the round. The Essendon-Melbourne game was very, very close to a 50-50. Melbourne only ended up starting very small favourites in that matchup. Looking at the first game, so Adelaide versus Geelong, this was Thursday night. 219 total points scored, Geelong winning by 19 in the end. Geelong had to overcome a 30-point deficit midway through the second term and ended up overcoming that, doing it convincingly and running out 19-point winners. Adelaide kicked 10 of the first 14 goals in this game for them to be able to get that lead. However, late in the second quarter, right here, Geelong kicked a couple of quick goals. Then Max Holmes got another one straight after halftime. And from there, Geelong were able to keep it within this kind of single-digit deficit. Then they got on this nice little run here, kicking 4 straight goals. Adelaide tried to respond. Isaac Rankin got one, but then Geelong got it back through Jeremy Cameron to seal the game in the final stages. In that second half, or technically in the fourth quarter, Geelong had 8 scoring shots to Adelaide's 1. It was 5 goals to 1 in that final term. Adelaide, this was definitely a disappointing loss for them after having a 5-goal lead in this game. They just couldn't stop the Cats scoring once they went forward, and they weren't able to do that themselves, but still scored 100 points, and that was for the 4th time so far this season. Against Gold Coast was the only time they haven't got to 100 points so far. So from that side of things, it was very good, but defensively, they did concede their highest score of the year. The second time a team's got to 100 or more against them, but at 119 was the highest score that they've had. Good game for the Crows coming up against GWS, which will be on Saturday. They'll have a good little rest advantage over GWS as well, considering the Giants played on Sunday and Adelaide played at home on the Thursday night. So extra 3 days rest advantage. For Geelong, this was good resilience to overcome a deficit on the road in a primetime game, because obviously this was an Adelaide home game. They were very efficient going forward, kicking 18 goals from the 59 inside 50 entries they had. They won the entry count 59 to 52 overall. Geelong did make more turnovers. The 100 points they conceded was the most any teams against Geelong so far this season, up from 98. St Kilda got 98 against them, so 2 points more than their highest. But one slight concern I will say is they had conceded 94 points at 3/4 time. So just the 1 goal, but this number could have easily pushed out to 115 or 120 had Adelaide played better in the fourth quarter. Geelong have a really good break, similar to Adelaide, but even better for Geelong. They don't play until next Monday, so it's almost getting to the point. It's kind of like they have a bye in between, having played on Thursday and then not till the Monday, and they'll play Hawthorn in the Easter Monday game, who Hawthorn are coming off the Sunday night game, so significant rest advantage for Geelong, having played the early game this week. On Friday night, also at the Adelaide Oval, Collingwood ran out 109 to 78 winners by 31 points against the Swans. In this matchup, Geelong covered the spread, but they were $2.20 out to $2.85. So market got it completely wrong. There was also the Tom Stewart who was ruled out late, which I think contributed to a lot of that market movement, but it was definitely still went the wrong way. And the game went over 181.5, but the market got the total right, going up from 179.5 through the week. Friday night, Collingwood ran out 31-point winners against Swans, 109 points to 78. Collingwood again drifted $1.54 out to $1.70. The game went over, but the market moved down from 170.5 down to 168.5. This was a close game through the first term. Collingwood led by 2 points at quarter time, but then got on a good roll midway through that second term. Nice run here, kicking 4 straight goals. Swans responded, kicking 3 straight, got the margin back to 10 points, near enough to halftime. Jamie Elliott's goal pushed it back out to 17 points as they went into the break. It was a fairly low-scoring second half. Collingwood doing majority of the scoring. They scored 6 goals to the Swans 4 through that second half, but definitely a lot lower scoring compared to the first half. For Collingwood, this was a good win for them to make it 4 straight wins since their opening round loss against GWS. It was very even, like Collingwood were just that bit more efficient going inside 52% to 44%. Most of these numbers, there's very little between them. Collingwood won the free kick count by a small margin. Collingwood did win the centre clearances 18-10. Swans got them at the stoppages 27-20. But overall, Collingwood definitely deserved to win this game. He had 29 scoring shots to 18 for Sydney, so big difference there. Could have potentially been a slightly bigger margin had Collingwood been a little bit more accurate. Sydney at 12 goals 6 is very accurate, with 16-13 definitely not so much. For Sydney, like they weren't really in the contest, especially after half-time in this game. Collingwood were just doing enough to maintain their margin. They've got to be more efficient going inside 50 with the ball. They had 11 less scoring shots with virtually the same inside 50 count, and in fact had 1 extra. Did well winning the stoppage clearances, but were still minus 24 points from stoppages overall for this game. On to Saturday, first matchup. This was played at Barossa Park, the first game there, and Gold Coast ran out 52-point winners. They were backed in from $1.40 to $1.22. But the game went over 180.5, and the market had moved down surprisingly from 181.5 throughout the week. Big win for the Suns. They go now 4-0 on the season overall. And this game was close for the most part. Gold Coast just kicked away in the fourth quarter, really, and kind of North Melbourne had a lead here midway through the third. If we go through, they had this period here when North Melbourne got on top. Gold Coast kicked 5 consecutive goals here. They went goal for goal, Darling, then Noble, and then another 4 straight goals here for Gold Coast, which pushed the margin right out, plus Ben Long's goal right at the death. North Melbourne, definitely they were competitive for the most part of the game. So the scoreline does show a bit more of a difference compared to what it could have looked like if Gold Coast hadn't absolutely dominated that fourth quarter where they kicked 7 goals to 2. But statistically, Gold Coast had 65 inside 50s to 47, so they were entitled to really kick up a score late in the game. They had 36 scoring shots and were pretty accurate, so they were expected to score around that 140 to 150 mark. This is the 4th game so far this season from their 5 that North Melbourne have conceded 113 or more points. They only managed 47 inside 50s overall, but statistically outside of that, it was fairly even. But 36 scoring shots for the opposition are definitely not ideal. For North Melbourne, they'll play Carlton on Friday night this weekend, so on a 6-day turnaround going into that matchup. And for the Gold Coast Suns in this game, they were very good overall. They've shown they can score points so far this season. They have scores of 136, 120, and 141 through their 4 games, and there's 91 against the Crows in the other matchup. Was a touch surprising considering the dominance in terms of inside 50s that they didn't kick away earlier in the game. It still was close late on. Obviously, you need to keep in mind the venue, but they did still concede 24 scoring shots from just 47 inside 50 entries for North Melbourne. Another very winnable game for Gold Coast coming up. They're on the road, but play Richmond at Marvel Stadium. So there'll be back-to-back road games for them. But on Saturday night, they'll face Richmond. They'll start favourites and have the opportunity to go 5-0 to start the season. Carlton versus West Coast. Carlton got their first win of the season. They had 36 scoring shots, won by 71 points. They are backed in from $1.15 to $1.12. The game went under 180.5, but the total moved up from 176.5 earlier in the week. So side was right, total was wrong from a market movement perspective. This was a pretty easy win for Carlton. They kind of just kept on extending their lead each interval throughout the game. Ended up running out 71-point winners. They did beat West Coast, obviously, who are yet to win a game so far this season. Did score 10 goals to 3 in the second half. So this was where the scoreline really blew out. It was only a 29-point margin at the main break. Looking at the stats for this game, was pretty dominant. Carlton had 421 disposals compared to 281, so 140 differential there. 73 inside 50, so a huge number for Carlton, and West Coast got 35 of their own. It's becoming like the trend for West Coast games, like every matchup is played down the other end of the field for them. 36 scoring shots from 73 entries for Carlton. Like, it's lucky they only did score 121 points. Realistically, had they kicked straighter, you should have been looking at 140, 150 points for them to score. West Coast just 13 points from their forward half. Only really points when they made turnovers in this game. But looking through the stats, they only made 49 turnovers, so a pretty low number. For Carlton, going forward this week, they're going to face North Melbourne, looking for back-to-back wins. North Melbourne, obviously, a side also who's only won the one game this year, so important game for both of those clubs. That game will be on Friday night. And then for West Coast, like, another tough game for them. They've now conceded over 106 points in 4 of the 5 games this season. Failed to score over 51 3 times now. And with the 35 inside 50s, it's not hard to see why that's the case. They're dominated at the center clearances, 17-5. Also at the stoppages, 23-13. And like, there's no real major positives to take out of this game. Only 77 contested possessions, so well down on those numbers overall. Just disappointing performance overall for West Coast. Going forward for the Eagles, they'll play Essendon at home this week on Friday, followed by Hawthorn the week after at Marvel Stadium. So it doesn't really get a great deal easier for them going forward. Brisbane made it 5-0 on the season, beating the Western Bulldogs 118-97 by 21 points. Aside from, this was very similar to the Adelaide Geelong game. This was the other best game of the round. It was a low scoring and very close first term. Brisbane led by 5 points at quarter time. Then in the second quarter, Western Bulldogs scored 7 goals to 1 and really got on top, especially when they kicked 2 of the first 3 goals after halftime. They had a 39-point lead early in that third quarter. From that point, Brisbane kicked 9 straight goals to put themselves in front. There was a little bit of fight back. Kennedy goal, Bailey Williams goal, and it was back to 1 point. But then Brisbane kicked 4 straight and ran out. Comfortable winners in the end, like the final 5 minutes or so wasn't never really in doubt. But a huge momentum run here by Brisbane to get them that win. They kicked 14 goals to just 5 for the Western Bulldogs throughout the second half. Absolute domination in the second half. For the Western Bulldogs, disappointing after being in such a good position around halftime, midway through the game. They just couldn't stop that momentum that Brisbane got going in that second half. In the center clearances, you can see 22-13, but were hammered at the stoppages 31-19. Turnovers very similar. Inside 50s and scoring shots were near identical, 53-54. But Brisbane 18 goals, 10 on 28 scoring shots compared to 14-13 on 27. That was ultimately the difference in the end, just that better accuracy in front of goal. One concern looking through is 39 tackles for the Western Bulldogs against a side whose reigning premier is a very low number. And considering they also had less disposals in this game, not that it was a huge number, it's 34 difference, to still have such significantly low and less tackles, that's a major concern defensively for the Bulldogs. For the Western Bulldogs, coming up this week, they are back at Marvel Stadium to play St Kilda on Sunday. That'll be an interesting game for both of those sides coming off losses. For the Brisbane Lions, this was a big win for them and probably their best performance overall in the season. Definitely up there with the game against Geelong. To be able to come from such a big deficit on the road, like both sides were on the road, but it wasn't in front of their home crowd or anything, to be able to get that momentum and produce a big second half. You've got to give them credit for that. Super accurate goal kicking, 18 goals, 10. made the most of their 54 inside 50 entries with 28 scoring shots. Did concede the 97 points, which makes it back-to-back games. They've conceded 90 plus, obviously conceding 90 against Richmond last week. That's definitely a touch concerning. They've had back-to-back weeks on the road, so you could forgive them a little bit, but defensively, against sides who have struggled so far this season, if they are playing teams who are very good defensively, they can't rely so much on their attack each week, considering like the past 4 games have all been against below average defensive sides. Quick turnaround for Brisbane this week. They'll play Collingwood, who'll have the extended rest after playing the Friday night game. And Brisbane are on a 5-day turnaround, but do get to go back home to the Gabba to face Collingwood, who they don't have a good record against, but we'll cover that in the betting trends preview later in the week. For this game, Brisbane were backed in from $1.58 into $1.52, so market got it right. But once again, the total was wrong. The market movement only got the total right one game this weekend. This game went over 170.5, but it moved down from 172.5 on Monday. Melbourne versus Essendon. Essendon running out, 39-point winners. Always look comfortable for the most part in this game. 15 goals, 6. Very, very efficient. Melbourne struggled to score once again. One covered as underdogs here, but they drifted from $1.91 out to $1.95. This game also went under, but it was moved up through the week from 169.5 to 171.5. Looking through the timeline for this game, you see Essendon kicked the first goal. Melbourne never led the game at any stage. They closed the gap a little bit to the 10-point margin midway through the third quarter. Essendon never really looked in too much danger, kicking 4 of the last 5 goals of the game to end up winning comfortably close to that 40-point margin. Not a great deal to say like with this matchup. Like Melbourne, once again, struggled to score. They just can't put points on the board, this team, this season. And it's difficult to see where those are going to come from. They've failed to score over 74 points, but spoke about it on the preview for this game as Melbourne's scoring has been on a bit of a decline. They scored 57 this week, up from the 46 they got last week, but not really that much more considering. For Melbourne in this game, they were hammered in terms of disposals, nearly minus 100 disposals, but did win the inside 50 account. So when they got the ball, they got it inside 50 quickly. They weren't stuffing around with extra handballs, extra kicks. They got the ball going forward, which is obviously what they're trying to do to get points on the board. They won the free kick count, won the centre clearances 16-7. There are positives in there as you go through. Only the 8 marks inside 50 though, and conceding 15 goals and 15 marks inside 50 when the opponent only had 43 entries. That's hugely concerning from a defensive point. But if they were able to actually make use of the ball and just didn't rebound straight out when they did go inside 50, then that could have helped that. Just a 33% efficiency going forward. For Melbourne this week, they are back at the MCG playing Fremantle. They're on a 7-day turnaround and will play on Saturday. And then for Essendon, very, very nice win for them in this game. Now made it back-to-back wins. They're coming off the bye, so in a good position going into this game, but super efficient going inside 50, over 50%. Made the most of their chances with those 43 entries they have. Centre clearances, that's a little bit of concern for them. They're a good clearance side in general, but to be beaten in the centre clearances by that much, I would definitely be concerned. A huge number of uncontested possessions. I think with Essendon, even though they didn't win the inside 50 count, they controlled possession of this game, so they weren't giving Melbourne easy ball off turnovers and that kind of thing. As often, you see 116 marks in this game. 15 marks inside 50, only conceded 8, all really good numbers. And defensively, efficiency was very good. They've now only conceded 60 and 57 points over their past 2 games. So their defensive numbers definitely coming down since they conceded 161 against the Crows back in round 2. For Essendon, they get a really good opportunity to go 3 straight. They'll play West Coast, but it'll be over in Perth. This back-to-back weeks on the road for them coming off their bye. On to the Sunday games. The first matchup, Fremantle against Richmond. Fremantle won by 61 points, 28 scoring shots to 12. And this game was played at Barossa Park. Fremantle backed in $1.13 to $1.10. Obviously got that right. Fremantle never really looked in doubt at all of losing this game. Aside from early on, but you always felt like Fremantle were just going to come over the top of them. It wasn't going to continue there for Richmond. Game went under 182.5, and surprisingly, this mark went up 176.5 up to 182. So significant movement with that total increasing, but literally went under with Richmond just getting 47 points. As I spoke about, like Richmond were in the game early. They only trailed by 2 points at quarter time, got back in front on the back of a couple of goals early in the second term. But from that point, Fremantle went on this run here, kicked 6 straight goals. Jacob Blight got one back for Richmond, but then there was another run here of 6 straight goals to close out the game for Fremantle, run out 61-point winners. Overall for Fremantle, that's now 3 straight wins. They've covered the spread in each of their past 3. And going along very nicely, they have Melbourne coming up this week, so another very winnable game. Just need to go over to the MCG to be able to get that game. So back-to-back weeks on the road for them, but they had played 3 straight home games leading into this matchup against Richmond, and this was, for the most part, kind of a training drill for them. Dominated centre clearances, 15-8. Disposals was very even. Fremantle, though, were much more efficient going inside 50 and had 65-36 entries. So with this kind of difference, you could have expected slightly bigger margin, more so pushing the 75 to 80 point differential. But Richmond only got the 12 scoring shots from 36 entries anyway, so it wasn't like they were very efficient at all going inside 50. So the margin's probably fairly close to really what it should have been. Richmond in this game, they made 63 turnovers, conceded 70 points from those turnovers, and they also only managed 8 points for the entire game from their forward half. For Richmond going forward, they will play Gold Coast at Marvel Stadium on Saturday this week. So another tough contest. After winning the first game, they've now lost 4 straight and in danger of probably losing 5 straight. They get Melbourne the week after, which the way Melbourne are playing, Richmond might give themselves a bit of a chance of getting that game, but we'll get to that when that game rolls around. For Fremantle overall, they did what they needed to do, controlled field position, got on top of the game late. Their key ball winners, shown wrong, definitely stepped it up and got them that ball out in the middle, especially as the game wore on. You can see won the clearances 43-33 overall. Won the contested possessions, limited the turnovers, and 17 marks inside 50, a very good number, and also just conceded 4 themselves, and 28 scoring shots to 12, a very dominant win. Then at Norwood Oval, GWS 30 scoring shots for 110 points, beat St Kilda by 28. St Kilda had an early lead in this game, but following that, GWS got on a roll. They kicked 5 straight goals and built about a 20-point margin, which they just extended on throughout the third term. After leading by 20 at halftime, they then built their lead out to 50 points at three-quarter time. St Kilda scored all 4 goals in the final term, so GWS were goalless in the last quarter, but didn't really do a great deal other than reduce the margin back down to 28 points. The money came for St Kilda in this game because GWS were $1.38 out to $1.50. So Mark got it wrong. It was over the total, which was 168 throughout the week. So there's no movement there from that perspective. For the statistics for this game, GWS had the majority of the ball, but St Kilda did win the inside 50 count 62-51. But once again, efficiency was the difference, 40% compared to 53%. Well and truly there in favour of GWS, and to have 30 scoring shots from 51 entries, really good numbers. A touch more efficient and more accurate would have been even better for GWS in this game, but I love the fact they had 30 scoring shots from that low number of entries. Won the stoppage clearances, but St Kilda won the centre clearances, and both sides have plenty of marks inside 50. St Kilda with a 14 and GWS with the 16. Overall for this game, it wasn't a bad performance by St Kilda. They came into this 3 straight wins and stayed in Adelaide after playing Port Adelaide there on Sunday, but obviously dropped this game. They get the chance to bounce back against the Western Bulldogs, but a little tricky period coming up for St Kilda. They play the Bulldogs at Marvel, then Brisbane at Marvel, and Fremantle at Marvel over the next 3 weeks. This will give us a really good indication where St Kilda is truly at. And then for the Giants, after their training drill last week against West Coast, come out and win this game the way they did, get 110 points on the board, keep St Kilda just to the 82. Really positive signs for them. They've moved up in the premiership market due to that. And now following this, they'll be in Adelaide again this week. So they're doing what St Kilda had to do last week and play the Crows on Saturday afternoon on a 6-day turnaround. But Crows will go into that game with the rest advantage, having played on the Thursday and GWS having played on the Sunday this weekend. And then final game of the round, Port Adelaide winning as underdogs. They're 270 out to 285, but they won the game by 30 points, 121-91. The game went over the total and it did move up 172.5 up to 174.5. First half was all Port Adelaide until these final 2 goals here, but Port kicked 12 of the first 13 goals in this game and led by 59 points at halftime. A couple of late goals here through Jack Gunston and then Lloyd Meek gave Hawthorn some chance. They got the margin back under 60, but there's a very long way back when you are on the road. Then in the second half, Hawthorn were a lot better. They kicked 11 goals to 6 in their favour. Were getting plenty of free kicks as well throughout that second half, which definitely made a difference. They won the free kick count 21-12. But Port Adelaide never really looked in danger. They just had all that momentum early on. 61 inside 50s to 48 in favour of Port Adelaide. Clearances. Hawthorn won the clearances. Centre clearances 19-14, but Port won the stoppage clearances 34-24. It was really a game of 2 halves. Like Port Adelaide, took the foot off last. They were the team that was really up for this game. You could tell in that first quarter, like Port Adelaide were there to play. Hawthorn off the bye, just weren't with it early on. Similar to like how they started prior to the bye against GWS. They didn't have the best first quarter. That game was like somewhat affected by wind, but back-to-back slow starts for Hawthorn have put them on the back foot early. Hawthorn slightly more turnovers was a little bit of a difference there. Both sides 12 marks inside 50, but 31 scoring shots to 21. Definitely the difference in the end. Port Adelaide very efficient going inside 50, scoring 54% of the time that they went inside 50. For Port Adelaide, following this, they travel up to the SCG to play the Swans. They're now 2-3 overall in the season. Need to win that game to get back to 50%. And for Hawthorn, they have 8 days rest, not playing until Monday, where they'll face Geelong. Go into that game with the rest advantage heavily in their favour. But Hawthorn, first loss of the season, get the opportunity to bounce back. So that's my review of all the games for round number 5. Looking at the ladder, Brisbane sit on top, 5-0. Then you've got 4 teams here, all at 4-1 on the season, on 16 competition points. Hawthorn were on top going into that round, but that loss is pushing down to 5th. Then another little bunch here, Geelong, Adelaide, Freo, and St Kilda on 3 wins. Then another 4 sides on 2, and another 3 sides on 1 win. Melbourne and West Coast still the winless sides through the first 5 games. Coming up this week, I'll be posting the AFL betting trends preview, so stay tuned for that. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss it. That's where I talk about the upcoming games. We'll go through the betting trends, look at their past matchups for how these teams have played against each other previously. We got some good games coming up this weekend. Brisbane versus Collingwood. The Friday game, you have North versus Carlton, and we'll win the game against West Coast most likely. But yeah, good games overall. Adelaide versus GWS is a good one. Sydney versus Port, if Port play the way they did against Hawthorn, or if that was just a one-off. Western Bulldogs, St Kilda, and then you have Geelong versus Hawthorn as well. So really good round for the Easter weekend. So stay tuned for the preview for those games. If you want to use the bet finders to study the games, use the statistics to find really good bets, I'll put the link to that in the description. That's where you also get access to everything I'm betting, which so far this season we're going really well on the AFL. And you also get additional preview shows of me breaking down games and going through why I'm making particular bets on these matchups. You also have all the tools to do the research on player props in terms of disposals and goal scorers and fantasy points. So everything that I use to study the games and determine what I'm betting, all those tools and betting tools are all included in the bet finders as well. I'll put the link in the description. Definitely recommend you check it out if you want to profit betting on the AFL. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.